Good morning, everybody. Good morning. So a few years ago, my father gave me and my sisters a gift unlike anything we had ever received from him. Prompted by an article on social democracy by the late historian Tony Judd, he had penned a 9-page letter to us containing his reflections on the social transformations left incomplete by his own baby boomer generation, and some individualized ideas for how we 3 daughters might remedy those failings. What prompts me to collect my thoughts presently on this subject is a deepening concern about how our society, through its government and through increasing citizen enlightenment, can continue to promote an equitable and prosperous society. To me, he wrote about the future of our nation's political problem-solving ability, because I was enrolled in a school of government at the time. To my sisters, he wrote about how their interests in education and law might intersect with societal needs. A man of few words, my dad had poured all of his most ardent hopes for our common future into this letter, seeing in his own daughters his most direct path of influence over that future. Now, I'm a proud AmeriCorps alum, and my career in this point had been in public service, but I consider this letter my first real call to service. It made me recognize the role I have in the broader community. It helped me understand that I have a legacy of service that I need to carry forward. And it made me reflect on how I could use my own talents for the world's most pressing problems. Now, my dad is not the only person who thinks that our American democracy is in a particularly bad way. We're all here this morning at some level because we believe that our civic life needs to be more inclusive for it to be more meaningful. And actually, I find some hope for the kind of at-scale change I think that we need in some unexpected quarters. This morning, I want to talk to you about a segment of the population that we typically think of as unreachable. They're people that pollsters would ignore, that political campaigns wouldn't call persuadable voters, and that they're engaged in civic life in ways that make them an important and promising component to the project of a more inclusive civic life. So for the past year, myself and researchers with the Google Civic Innovation Portfolio, John Webb, Chris Chapman, and Charlotte Krontiris, have been referring to this group of people as interested bystanders and digging as deep as we can to understand what is it that motivates these people to do things that are civic. To do this, we conducted in-person interviews, over 100 of them in 6 cities across the country, and we fielded a digital survey to over 2,000 people representative of the United States population. So, the first thing you should know about interested bystanders is that there are a lot of them. Almost half the US population, the US adult population, according to our research. 48.9% of Americans are paying attention to the world around them, even if they're not actively voicing their opinions or taking action. Now, to be clear, if you bought a ticket to Personal Democracy Forum, you're probably not an interested bystander. But your mom might be, or your brother-in-law might be, or that lady that you see on the train reading the paper in the morning. These are people who, in a Western democratic context, know what civic challenges exist and would like to complain or act to improve the situation, but just haven't yet found the motivation to do so. They're people from a broad variety of different backgrounds. They may be technologically connected, and they may even have some past experience of civic activity. They just aren't doing anything right now that's particularly civic. And although the word civic may have meaning to those of us in this room, we've come to see that it's not a term that has shared understanding among interested bystanders. In fact, the second thing you should know about interested bystanders is that they have very complicated perspectives on civic life. I want to introduce you this morning to 3 sort of bystander paradoxes that I think are particularly relevant for understanding why this is going to be a challenging group to engage. So the first paradox is that there's a kind of misalignment between the ways that interested bystanders think they should be engaging civically and the ways that they're actually engaging. Interested bystanders are not taking the political actions that they value, and on the flip side, they're underrating what they're doing right now as civic actors. So when asked to just sort of rank themselves as how civically engaged they are, interested bystanders say they're some version of middling. They're not totally disengaged, but they're not the top. And these comments serve as a kind of mental model of civic engagement that's about a traditional, politically defined notion of civic life, where you kind of move up the civic ladder from sharing your opinions to voting to organizing and protesting. Interested bystanders tell us that they are stalled on this ladder, not because they're not involved in issues they care about, but because the ladder is fundamentally political. In fact, interested bystanders tell us that they associate politics with contention and conflict, and they're not interested in engaging in that kind of conflict. So, and all of this sort of leads them feeling like what they're doing isn't enough, that it doesn't matter, that it's not going to make a difference. This is embarrassing, and it's also demotivating. And so what we find is that interested bystanders are stalled. While they value the higher ladder actions, they're actually performing the lower ladder actions. While interested bystanders associate the political aspects of civic life with conflict and shame and negative experience, they're very attracted to the community and social aspects of civic life. When we ask them to tell us about a time recently when they did something that they would consider civic, they talk to us about things like volunteering, either continuously or in a one-time service engagement, and donating money or raising money for some sort of cause. They talk about these actions as being involved in the community, and they describe a desire to participate out of a sense of personal fulfillment and purpose. They talk much less frequently about things that are on the traditional political sort of civic ladder, with the exception of signing a petition, which we'll talk about in a moment. So just to give you an example, we met a gentleman, an older gentleman in Phoenix, who had had a very difficult life. And he considered himself, I think, to be in a kind of period of redemption and healing after many years of strife. He had a sort of hard exterior, but perhaps because of his age, he felt an empathy with the senior women who live in the complex where he lives. This is a picture of it in daytime. He had heard about scammers coming to the door in the community, and so he decided that he was going to take a nightly security walk just to make sure everything was fine. So every evening at 11 p.m., he goes out and walks around the perimeter of his complex. And he can tell you who are the people waiting at the bus stop, and he can tell you about the condition that the properties are in. He doesn't ask for permission to do this, neither does he seek any recognition. It's just part of how he views his role in his community. And this is just one of many examples from our research of how interested bystanders really are much more attracted to a community and socially defined notion of civic life. While they venerate the civic ladder, they actually participate more in civic life. So the second paradox that I want to share with you is that interested bystanders believe that power comes from having a voice, but they're very disinclined to share their own opinions. One way of acting on an opinion is signing a petition, and in fact, signing a petition was the most frequently cited civic action among interested bystanders. However, it's not an action that they really value that much, but it's what they're doing to advocate for their interests. One gentleman told us, I've lost some friendships over my views. You have your opinions and I'll have mine, but I won't voice them unless it's absolutely necessary, indicating a shared sentiment among interested bystanders that they're really not interested in sharing or receiving people's opinions. In fact, one gentleman told us, you might as well be a bum asking for a quarter, when asked to describe how much he enjoyed hearing other people's opinions. So, debate is the bedrock of our democracy, but across the board, we heard from interested bystanders that they were uninterested in engaging in that debate unless they had a really deep knowledge of the topic or they were not worried about the backlash that would come with it. In general, they view politics as a source of conflict, and they want to avoid experiencing that conflict with their friends and family, online or in person. And the third paradox from interested bystanders is that while they tell us that they feel they have the most power at the local level, they're only voting in national elections. So So just to give you a sense of what's happening here with interested bystanders, they say that they feel that that they have this kind of sense of power and efficacy in a local level, but are only voting really in national elections. One gentleman told us, local elections, I never really vote in those. They're the ones with the most importance, but they get the least attendance. That's actually where you have more clout, but I don't vote in them. I only vote in presidential elections or midterm elections. And in general, interested bystanders who report voting say that they lack some sense of the efficacy of their vote, although they do it out of a sense of routine or piety or obligation. One woman told us, does my vote really count? I don't know, but I feel like I should do my part. So while they say that they have power at the local level, they're exercising that power only at the national level, indicating a kind of tension between their voting choices and their own sense of efficacy. So given this landscape of fascinating paradoxes in the way that interested bystanders view power and participation and engagement in society, a final finding actually really seems to make sense. And this is where we get to the topic of self-interest. When they do take civic action, interested bystanders tell us they do things that are in the public interest when it aligns with their self-interest. So this is important to remember. Interested bystanders are typically those folks who are not very civically engaged. So when they do step into the civic arena, they tell us it's for one of three reasons. First, that they have prior professional or personal experience that they want to bring to bear to a situation, or they feel that they'll receive personal or professional benefits by being involved. Second, they feel that they have clear interests at stake, and they want to protect those interests. And third, they're seeking some kind of emotionally meaningful experience, something that gives them a sense of purpose and meaning. So this is important. Interested bystanders are telling us that they do not act out of a sense of altruism, absent some direct personal benefit to themselves. Should we be surprised? Well, these are people who live very busy lives, who lack a clear understanding of what they could actually do to make a difference, and who are generally unconvinced that that thing would really matter anyway. I don't think that we should be surprised. I think this is rational behavior. So what do we do with the fact that almost half the United States population needs to perceive some direct benefit to themselves in order to do something in the public benefit? I think my father knew this when he wrote this letter, encouraging us to think about how our career interests could be directed towards public needs. And so I, too, have written a letter with my thoughts about some of the implications of this, but for you, this dear community here at PDF. And I don't know all of you as well as my father knows his daughters, so I'll ask you to kindly consider which pieces of advice are most relevant for your interests and your talents. Dear PDF, over the next year and a half, our civic life will contract. It will narrow to focus mostly on the 2016 elections. This is a natural part of the cycles of American civic life, but before we completely lose sight of all of the other aspects, I want to offer you three implications that I think matter from this research as you move forward and work on whatever you're doing to try and improve our American democracy. The first implication is that you don't have to design for activists or the apathetic. You can design for interested bystanders and reach a huge market of people and have a huge impact. You may want to consider resetting your strategies through the lens of an interested bystander. Maybe you want to think about how you create features that allow your users to connect their professional skills with community needs. Maybe you want to think about doing better discovery to really understand what interests they're really willing to fight for. Or perhaps you can consider rethinking the role of emotion and meaning in their interactions. The second implication is that we need to be designing civic interventions that flow from everyday Americans' real motivations and not our aspirations of them. So we shouldn't be designing products and programs and services and policies that assume some sort of a priori willingness among our intended participants to spend precious time and resources doing things that do not have a direct benefit to themselves. And more broadly, how can we think about helping them do more of what they're already doing? How can we help them mine a sense of personal power to take action on the things that they really care about? I think this is where we really need to grapple with the role of self-interest. And finally, voting is important, but we need to do a much better job of really digging into the civic fulfillment that comes from the community and social aspects of civic life. Now, elections are an incredibly important lever of power for people, for the everyday person, particularly at the local level. But interested bystanders who vote tell us they do so out of a sense of obligation, not because they understand the efficacy of their vote. If election season is the only time that we try to engage interested bystanders, they will never feel engaged, precisely for this reason. It's incumbent upon us to be more creative, however, about connecting the electoral processes that seem so hollow to them now with the community and social aspects that give them so much sense of fulfillment. And this is exciting because I think this is where technology can really make a difference. So, we did this research because we saw a need in our community that we had the ability to address, and I am thrilled this morning to be able to share the full findings of our research with all of you at googlepolitics.blogspot.com. If you go there, you'll find a full findings report and a deck of all of our findings. We're really excited to hear what the implications of this research might be for the work that you're doing, and we know that it's going to take an even broader coalition than the people in this room to realize the kind of inclusive and just and participatory society that we all desire. We're excited to be able to contribute knowledge and information to that endeavor. So to close, I'd like to recognize my co-researchers and everybody in this audience who over the past year helped us to shape and define and conduct and interrogate our research. And last but not least, I'd like to recognize my father, Ted Krontiris, and all of the parents who have found their own ways to embed in their children a moral compass, to help them recognize the responsibilities of service that come with the privilege of citizenship, and to embed a deep conviction in a more perfect society. I remain extremely hopeful about the possibility of a more inclusive civic life, and so I'll close my letter to you this morning with thanks for your kind attention and the hope that you heard something here this morning that encourages you along your own path. Thank you, and have a great PDF.